Greetings, class. This will be a slightly longer clip than usual. We'll have a little bit more to talk about as we address the following question. How can options be invented? Uh, it's from page 69 in our book, Getting to Yes. And when you open up your book, you'll see the circle chart there. Um, there's four quadrants that deal with questions about what happens in theory versus what happens in reality versus what is wrong and what might be done. And we can use this again as another mechanism for strategically thinking about our responses and our interventions to problems, crises, and conflict. Um, Again, the book itself is about getting to yes, about uh, being able to settle and resolve disputes. We could think about this framework as extending to broader categories. We could even apply this, for example, to the coronavirus that we're dealing with currently. Step one is the problem. This is the part where we think about what's wrong, what are current symptoms, what are disliked facts contrasted with a preferred situation. Step two, analysis. Diagnose the problem. Sort symptoms into categories. Suggest causes. Observe what is lacking. Note barriers to resolving the problem. Step three, approaches. What are possible strategies or prescriptions? What are some of the theoretical cures? Generate broad ideas about what might be done. Step four, action ideas. What might be done? What specific steps might be taken to deal with the problem? Um, Again, we frequently run into these challenges that, as we're thinking our way through a conflict, we might get ahead of ourselves. We decide what we want to do before we know why we should do it or why that might work. And we can get lucky. We can jump to conclusions and get lucky and have the desired outcome. But frequently we'll see that we are not in alignment with reaching desired outcomes when we take the steps without knowing whether or not that will address the issues that are being dealt with. So when we start with the problem, what's wrong, what we're really looking for is the statement, right? It might be an I statement. I am not getting my needs met. I'm not getting what I want. I am feeling disrespected. Um, this isn't working. And then we get to be more detailed about it. And we can look at the specific actions or events. Again, the symptoms of that demonstrate the presence of a challenge. Right? A child goes to a parent, says, "Mom, I feel sick." The mom's first step is usually what's wrong, right? And the child will then identify, "I have a headache, my stomach hurts," something, right? You get a specific source. So in a conflict, my needs aren't being met. Okay, what needs are those? What needs need to be met? What needs aren't being met? How would you meet those needs? Right. So step two, analysis, where we diagnose the problem. Right. So if we go back to the child, I feel sick. Parent asks, "So what's wrong?" Child identifies the symptoms. Right. As most parents are familiar, Um, headache can mean multiple different things. Fever can mean multiple different things. So different symptoms bundle together to indicate different details, right? Given the prevalence of coverage on the coronavirus, a kid coming, to mom might not say I feel sick. Might say I think I have the coronavirus. Um, and then lay out some symptoms which may or may not be consistent with that fact pattern. And, on the one hand, parents probably don't want to diagnose, COVID 19 without having medical testing to do so. If the child says, my toe hurts, there's probably pretty good indication that there might be some pain here, something that needs to be addressed, but that's not a symptom, right? We can classify things in or out. So when we look at the conflict and we identify the details, right, what's going on, we're then able to label things, right? Is this disrespect or is it miscommunication? Right? We might have litmus tests that we can perform for things like that. Do I think the person knew what they were doing at the time something happened? We can suggest causes, right? Motive is something that we frequently play into our assessments. If we think that we have an idea why somebody did something, then we can lay out, what is that factor? How does that get to be a part of the context? Step 3, the approaches. What are possible strategies or prescriptions? Right? We know that there's a problem. We've come up with some fact patterns that we've used to establish kind of our diagnostic criteria of what is happening. Okay, so now what are we going to do about it, right? This is one of the first parts where we truly address whether or not there is alignment between our strategy in terms of will we get from the problem to the desired outcome. If, for example, you feel like you're being disrespected, you could think about what are your strategies for getting treated with respect. First step frequently is to make the other party or parties involved aware of the challenge, right? I'm feeling disrespected by the things you're saying. When you say X, I experience it in a way that does not treat me with my full moral worth. But in addition to that, we can see that there are different ways that we can frame the conflict, which establish conditions for respect, which would include treating the other person with respect, right? Does screaming and yelling at the person, don't treat me that way, work to better deliver the desired outcome of being treated with respect? Or just trying to say it in a calm and collected way, I don't like the way I'm being treated, right? Actually, there are cases in which screaming and yelling at somebody might work better than trying to be calm and collected. I don't want to say that there's like a solution that should always work. Screaming and yelling might actually work better in some cases because it might showcase the sense of urgency or seriousness that the person might not have realized that there was really an issue, and saying something in a calm and collected way might look like it's not that big of a deal, where actually you want it to be an action event. So again, we think about our approaches based upon what do we think this is likely to do in terms of generating outcomes. Problem analysis approaches. Step 4, action ideas. What might be done? What specific steps might be taken to deal with the problem? The key here is that frequently we do come up with things about what should be done that are actually not employable, right? Like the best outcome would be produced if we did certain things, but we're not able to do those things. So that's not particularly helpful. So we want to think about what are the things that we could do that would address the problem. So again, using our contemporary situation example, right? Teaching classes online can work, right? There's good scholarship shows that student learning outcomes can be achieved through online formats. Some students even prefer to receive their information online and have discussion boards and so forth. But for other students, it will be a challenge. For many instructors, it will be a challenge to make the transition. Like I have a week to get everything scheduled and slated for the rest of the term. Otherwise, students are left hanging, right? That's less desirable, right? That's not what you would want to do. I mean, if you had a chance to plan in advance. But we don't have a chance to plan in advance. We did not know that this outbreak was happening. We didn't know that the pandemic would spread. We didn't know that there would be the reaction by the U.S. government in our case, or local governments, mayors and governors acting to step up or to try and impact the spread of this pandemic. But that's where we are. So our analysis could involve the part where we say, like, if we had a time machine, then this is what we could do to really fix the problem. But since we don't have a time machine, we're stuck dealing with the reality of what can we do now. So the reality of what are the action items? Well, I can make the best videos that I can. I can try to follow the outline, right? This is actually what I'm doing. I'm going to make sure I discuss and go over. And it's not the same, right? Because we don't have the back and forth. I don't get to get a question from students while I'm going through the same as I would in the classroom. But I'm trying to make sure I cover all of the details to all of the quick write questions, right? Right, that's an action item. And then I'll incorporate the Zoom platform and use the other tools at my disposal so that when I cover something in a video, if I didn't go over a question, you're still in a position where you can get that answered. Now, getting the yes doesn't deal with, some of the management aspects that we're covering in class. What they're really detailing is the part where we're trying to negotiate agreement without giving in, right? You want to get your outcome and you don't want to have to give up too much in the process. So let's put this into a smaller context, a context like what they're dealing with, right? They're looking at more of the kind of interpersonal negotiation dynamics. There's a tension. So, different example, right? Very common one. I know I've used it in class before, but it's effective, right? Barking dog disputes. We have lots of issues where there's neighbors who are in disagreement over barking dogs. And there's a lot of different ways that this can manifest. And is it the time of day the dog's barking? Is it the amount of barking? Is it the volume of the barking? And so what we experience, right, is one neighbor has the opinion like dogs will be dogs, or my dogs aren't that bad, or that other person's just being too picky, or they're being too sensitive, and you have the neighbor who's being disturbed, right? It could be, the dogs bark all night long and I'm not able to sleep. The dogs bark as soon as the person goes to work, and they bark all day while the person's gone, right? Different things can manifest. So each side then has a chance to start assessing the situation. What's the problem, right? The person who's experiencing the barking in a way that's disruptive to their daily life, they're saying that the problem is the barking, but the other person's experiencing it as the problem is the neighbors being too picky. Right? And so as we progress from that one, right, in our assessment of it, what do we do, right? We get to the part in the assessment, and this may end up involving a neutral third party, a mediator, somebody else to help facilitate it. But we have to bridge that gap, right? It's not a question about right and wrong. Both sides can actually be right. Dogs do bark, it's true. But there also might be reasonable expectations or accommodations for how much barking is permitted. Okay? Dogs do bark, but we do have expectations that we don't have to deal with noises in the middle of the night. And right, so there might be dynamics to add to the situation. But the bottom line is, right, both parties, at least up front, need to be made aware of what's going on. Many of these barking dog disputes do detail fact patterns where a dog owner actually is not aware about how much barking is done while they're gone because of exactly what it is. It's something that happens while the person's not home. So once a person gets made aware of what their pets are doing, what the behavior's like during the day while they're gone, they're now put into a position where they can think about how to mitigate that. Maybe apologize. I had no idea. I certainly wouldn't want to trouble you during the day. Um, and respond to it. On the other side, a neighbor who's being too demanding about the silence that they are hoping for during the day also might just need to be made aware of. Like, there is no covenant in our homeowners association that prohibits the ownership of pets or says dictates in any way, shape, or form about how much noise those pets can make. Right? And the person can say, like, I have taken these steps to try to limit the impact of the barking, but I'm not required to do anything more than what I'm already doing. And the person might actually have the part where they end up backing down some from what had initially been a firm position. Um, but the biggest part that I would encourage is the part where it gets to the action items. Right? And so part of the inventing solutions here is that, again, going beyond the getting to yes, but doing the part where I frequently talk about getting to the relationship. If neighbors are going to live next to each other for a long period of time, there's lots of reasons why it'd be highly desirable for the two of them or the group of them to be able to get along. And if you can't get along with somebody over a small task of what to do about a dog that's barking and how to make that work better for the whole neighborhood, it's hard to imagine that the people would be able to get together to deal with complex problems, right? Like coronavirus. One of the things we're supposed to be doing right now is having social distancing. Close neighbors are able to help manage some of that for one another, right? And so if you build the relationship, you figure out how to work together to reach mutually beneficial outcomes, right? And there's no reason that we can't figure out how to make things work, right? If we have the practice of working together on small problems, then we're better equipped to deal with the big problems. So inventing solutions is really a creative process in which we think about what's going on and what to do about it in a way that actually seems like we could put this into effect, and putting it into effect would have the desired outcome. Thank you.